Hey guys, what's going on? Today we're going to be discussing whether or not Antifa's First Amendment rights to freedom of speech, expression, and the ability to protest are being infringed. This came about because last night I was listening to a video from Tim Pool where apparently some individuals from CNN were talking about unmasking Antifa. And especially with the situation with Mr. No over this past weekend, there's heightened concern over the potential for violence in these United States here. So I just wanted to take a look at this, and I just started thinking about it because I'm like, all right, if I'm going to be a freedom of speech type of guy, and I'm going to support that, that means you need to support freedom of speech and the ability for people to express themselves, even if you happen to disagree. And I realize I have criticisms of Antifa just because we got to denounce all violence and everything, especially if it's being initiated as well. Yes, you have the right to defend yourself. Your rights end where another person's rights begin. So if you're going to sock someone in the face, they have the ability to defend themselves. However, does this happen in absolutely every situation? I don't think so. Have we seen acts of violence on a bunch of different sides, given a bunch of different situations? Yes. So I just figured we'd take a quick look at this. So right over here, we have this is from Middle Tennessee University here, and this is the First Amendment Encyclopedia that they have set up here. And this is an article on anti-masking laws by Mr. Robert A. Kahn. And basically they're saying a lot of these laws came about back in the antebellum era. So basically, for instance, in 1845, New York made it illegal to appear disguised and armed, quote unquote. Most anti-mask laws that have been passed typically were in response to the KKK. So basically, you have a bunch of individuals, they're concealing their identity, they're going around, they were perpetuating acts of violence. Laws were passed to prevent that. What ended up happening, though, is over the years, there have also been other cases from the KKK themselves saying they need the right to wear masks in order to promote their unpopular opinions and basically avoid being doxxed, persecuted as well. And what I found while doing some research into this is there are states with different cases on the books. However, depending on the situation, there does seem to be nuance here, and I've seen rulings going in different directions here. So let's just take a couple of look at these ones that we hear right now. And as it says, most anti-masking laws do not target specific groups explicitly. Instead, they use neutral language, typically banning mask wearers wearing that intimidates others. However, what we've also found in most of these articles, there are exceptions for such as masquerade balls, Halloween, and a lot of those proponents that are saying they have the right to be masked are saying that these exceptions are basically excluding them. That's basically my opinion, what I've taken away from this situation. So basically, as it says here, opponents in turn make three arguments. The first one, they invoke freedom of association, claiming that mask laws deprive wearers of the anonymity needed to express their views. They rely on the NAACP versus Alabama from 1958, which held that because its members feared harassment from opponents of civil rights, the NAACP did not have to reveal its membership list until Alabama could supply a compelling state interest. Okay, and that's going to be important going on. So the Klan members argued that if their masks were removed, they would face harassment. The Klan's unpopularity added fuel to this argument. For example, in American Knights of the Ku Klux Klan versus the city of Goshen, North Dakota, from 1999, a court found that Klan members had indeed suffered harassment through vandalism and bomb threats and ultimately invalidated the city's anti-mask law. So this is why I say we are seeing rulings going in different ways. So, I mean, there does seem to be a great deal of nuance in this. And again, these are much more publicized, more extreme examples that we have seen. Again, we have the historical basis that a lot of these laws came about due to violence about folks that were being harmed, oppressed, even murdered and killed and lynched. And then we see cases in the future where a lot of the same folks or members of organizations that historically have done horrific things are now utilizing the First Amendment to defend against it as well. So let's move on. So the Second Court of Appeals in the Church of American Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. The KKK versus Carrick. The Second Circuit from 2004 held that the harassment of Klan members was irrelevant because the Constitution guarantees only the right to speak, not conditions under which one speaks. Furthermore, in most cases involving the Klan, courts held that protecting citizens from intimidation was a compelling state interest. See, we're going back to a compelling state interest. And we'll move on to non-Klan mask wearers generally fared better when making freedom of association claims. In Arian versus Mackey from North Dakota, or ND, Texas, 1978, and Ghaffari versus the Municipal Court from 1978, political opponents of the Shah of Iran successfully argued that they needed masks to avoid reprisals from the Shah's security forces. As we can see, this is a different situation here, although we are starting to utilize a lot of these same principles in that it is for the ability under the First Amendment to peacefully assemble and protest and address grievances, to speak freely. And we're actually going to delve into some other parts of the First Amendment here, such as the religious context, in just a moment here. So, and as we can see, anarchists convicted under New York's anti-mask law failed, however, to raise a constitutional claim in the People versus Abof, circa 2001, because they could not show any harassment beyond famous anarchists having been persecuted in the past. And as you can see here, people have argued that masks constitute symbolic speech. As well, let's just move on here. I just want to start getting to some of the other side things here. Okay, so here's the part where we have the exceptions. Okay, so it says opponents contended that most of the anti-mask laws violate equal protection clause because they make exceptions for Halloween masks, masquerade ball masks, and masks worn for medical reasons, but not for political acts. These arguments convinced the California court in Ghaffari, but not the Georgia Supreme Court in the State versus Miller from 1990, which defends Georgia's exemptions as distinguishing between threatening and non-threatening masks. Okay, so my question would be, what does that mean? I'll give you a personal example. So back about 6 years ago, I went to PAX, and this was back in 2013, and this is when the Batman, the Dark Knight Rises came out. I put together a pretty badass Bane outfit. However, this was also after we had a horrific shooting in a movie theater during the airing of that movie. So while I was going to the venue, I thought to myself, memes, this is a situation that has happened. I, at the time, been working at it, but and had a pretty dang good Bane costume, so I think I'm going to actually use that for the screenshot for this video. But essentially, as I was walking up to the event, I thought to myself, maybe it's not the best idea to have a mask on, because maybe that would elicit a response from the police officers that were guarding outside that event. So what I did was I took my mask off, I carried it in my hands, and I walked making sure my hands were clearly seen. I also got to acknowledge that as my dad, Mr. Memes, happened to be an attorney, I was aware of certain situations that could potentially escalate things. Not everybody necessarily knows that, but as far as understanding what your constitutional rights are, as far as being taught in civics class, that's entirely of the video that I'd like to get into at another point. So let's just come on and move forward with this. So we'll go to the SPLC right here, because as we understand, the SPLC, they're not a big fan of the Klan. Obvious reasons. So let's go through this. So basically they bring up, is the practice of unmasking laws exposing violent haters or denying their constitutional rights? And they bring up basically the same example here about the Klan here. So basically it says, that's a question two courts in the 1990s faced, answered in opposite ways. A definitive answer may have to wait for the United States Supreme Court decision. As far as I know, and again, perhaps I just haven't done enough research. Perhaps this is something that does seem to appear to be state by state. I believe currently 15 states. I remember at one point it was about 18 different states did have actual unmasking laws, and they do seem to kind of go back and forth. And there is an actual compelling a factor for there, because remember what we were talking about before about the level of scrutiny given. So just moving right along here, they're basically talking about again the list of names there, and then as the Supreme Court pointed out in 1995, that struck down an ordinance prohibiting the anonymous distribution of political leaflets. Anonymity is a shield from the tyranny of the majority. Thus, it exemplifies the purpose behind the Bill of Rights and of the First Amendment in particular, to protect unpopular individuals from retaliation and their ideas from suppression at the hand of an intolerant society. And that is from McKendry versus the Ohio Elections Commission back from 1995. So that is, in a way, establishing a certain level of precedent. And here's the thing. It kind of goes into the same thing that I'd say to a lot of individuals, whether it's on YouTube or the internet. I support your right to speak freely. However, at the same time, that I will use my free speech to say, just because you have the right to say something doesn't always mean you should. Because look at what's going on right now. People are saying things often to just get a rise out of folks. And this is coming from a self-identified troll. It's like, I don't know. I personally see it more of an art to just get people to think. The whole concept of, hey, be a noble troll or something. Get people to think. I don't want to just order or command somebody to say, you must think this way. No. I just want you to think, come to your own conclusions based upon the best information and the most truthful information possible. And that's just seeming much harder to do again and again, even throughout these articles we're going through right now. It's just, I realize it's a rant here. But, so yeah, essentially that was the argument made by Jeff Berry, the Imperial Wizard of the American Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, in a lawsuit filed in the federal court last year against the city of Goshen. This article is back in 99. So, I mean, these are articles that were written back then. I just want to get to the part where the religious potential issues here. So, it's not in this article. But essentially what had been brought up is, okay, if we're going to pass laws that are going to be very encompassing, and this is what a lot of folks that are more on the proverbial right usually say, we just need to enforce the laws on the books rather than actually pass new legislation, because you're always going to catch extra fish and stuff like that. It's going to affect people in a way that the law was initially designed for. So I'm essentially kind of making the same case here. So if people have the right to maintain their anonymity for fear of retribution, my big thing with this is we got to do it equally. If we're going to hold to a principle, if we're going to say we have principles, it shouldn't matter who we fill in the blank with. It shouldn't matter if it's the Proud Boys. It shouldn't matter if it's Antifa there. Because as far as I've seen, folks are saying, oh, well, these groups are this and that. I'll be straight up. I went to a free speech event. I had an opportunity to join the Proud Boys. I didn't. Why didn't I? Because I didn't agree with the words I'd have to say. Of course, yeah, if you're with a group of folks and, you're kind of getting along and stuff, okay. I can understand. You want to be part of something. However, to speak words that you do not believe simply because that's what the group is doing, I just think that's wrong. And that's something that I think we're seeing too much. Folks are just kind of going with the flow. They're doing what's popular. The folks around you, because, hey, I believe most folks are good people, and I believe that they're doing what they believe is right. Unfortunately, people do get taken advantage of, and when tempers flare and emotions are high, we do start seeing these acts of violence. And this is just something that I'm trying to avoid here. But essentially what we had, let me just see if it was in this other article here. So, no. But essentially they had brought up the issue that if you're going to pass a law where you can essentially not wear any type of face covering, and again, they had certain exceptions for like individuals that went under medical procedures as well as different religious outcomes. But again, that seems to depend on the state. if we're going to start passing legislation saying that nobody can wear a face covering, I mean, that to me seems like we're violating people's First Amendment rights to their religion as well. Because let's face it, we got millions of Muslim brothers and sisters here in the United States. And if somebody, based upon their religion and their freedom of expression, wish to wear a face covering, that's protected under the First Amendment. From what I can see from looking at these different articles here, is it comes down to the level of scrutiny. So strict scrutiny for the Supreme Court, that's the highest tier right there. And then they have other levels going beyond that. And depending on the case, we see certain levels of scrutiny. So it comes down to back what we were talking about within the state's interest. What's the state interest? The state interest is to establish law and order and provide under the auspice of the Constitution of the United States and the individual constitutions of said states and commonwealths. What happens if that's violated? Well, that's why we have the Constitution. So right over here, we have the Bill of Rights. So as we can see, the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And that's ultimately where we come down to, because if we have individuals that wish to express their views and wish to protest and peacefully assemble, that's fine. However, if we're going to have groups that have a high likelihood, and we do see historical evidence of there being violence there, it ultimately comes down to why we can't have nice things. I personally feel that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And if a lot of more of my leftish brothers and sisters, here's the thing, if we feel like we have the better ideas, the better arguments, I would ask, not demand, simply ask, take the mask off, remove the mask, because with the rise of black bloc, we're seeing the rise of blue bloc as well. We just start seeing whatever the other side is, adopting the same tactics, and we're devolving into the purity spirals again and again. And it just comes down to, we have Americans hating, hurting, and killing each other. And that's wrong. And that needs to stop. This isn't the America that I remember growing up in. And again, I'm just a some dude on the internet that has my own personal life experience, but it didn't seem to be that way. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one. My big thing is a lot of kind of folks on the left, they feel, at least to me what I get is they don't feel like they're being heard. And I hear a lot of the same arguments saying, oh, these folks on the right are going ahead. Oh, these folks on the left are controlling everything. It's like, I hear this and it's like, all right, if we have the better ideas, a lot of times it seems like more of the rightish folks, maybe they happen to be the better sales folks. And even with ex-Mrs. Memes, she was wicked smart. She was an internationally certified board behavior analyst. And I pitched to her, I'm like, I think what a lot of the folks on the left kind of have an issue with is they're not the greatest of salespeople. And that's something that she agreed with. And I do think there are cases for this. There are a number of commentators out there. It's just, I think a lot of folks, some of the smartest folks that I hear, they don't want to participate because it does seem just so toxic. You express your view and also you're going to get attacked from all these different things. It's like, yeah, I get it, but I truly think that a lot of these things are solved, not necessarily with new legislation or anything. I think a lot of internet filters and stuff can take care of this. We saw this in World of Warcraft, but my big thing is we got to be principled, and if we're going to believe in freedom of speech, we need to ask, are people's rights being infringed here? And I do think it's nuanced, but what we're seeing right now is if there's violence, as far as the state goes, if they need to establish order and protect the citizenry, I don't know, man. It's just, I don't want to see other folks get caught up in the crossfire and everything. It's just, we need to denounce violence wherever we see it. We cannot incite it. We cannot promote it, because that's not the American way. That's not civil discourse. So Uh, I hope you guys maybe took a little something away. I'm going to put all these different articles in the description below, and if you like it, hey, feel free to continue watching any of this content. So,